Good afternoon, everyone, or morning or evening, depending on where you are. My name is Nick Bodeker. I'm going to be the host of the Changemaker Journey session today. We have about 12 people, so I'd love to start out before we kind of dive into the content. If people could just maybe just introduce themselves quickly, since we have a relatively small group, and I will just call on people. If you could just let us know your name, maybe where you're calling in from, anything else that you want to share briefly. Victor, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Victor. I'm currently in Los Angeles, and I am 17 years old.
Great, thank you. And sorry, I'm Nick. For people that just joined, my name is Nick Bodeker. I work for Ashoka, the organization that's putting on the Ashoka U Exchange. I work on the Youth Years team, and I'm based out of Washington, D.C. Kennedy, can you introduce yourself next?
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Kennedy. I'm also with Ashoka, but on the US Mentor and Fellowship team. Really nice to meet everyone. Really quickly, I do have to do the legal stuff, so I'm quickly going to read this privacy script statement, and then from there, I'll pass it on to everyone else. So welcome everyone to the virtual Ashoka U Exchange. We're hosting this event, and as you guys can probably all tell now, we are recording this. So we'll probably be using some of the clips, images, recordings, quotes, and other parts of this in any Ashoka publications and or on social media. So if you don't wish to be recorded, please turn off your camera and ask questions via the chat window. And we'll post additional info regarding recording and consent in the chat box. But if you have questions, just let me know. But nice to meet everyone.
Wonderful, thank you. Can we move to Ken?
Hi, this is Ken. I'm professor of Japanese University. I'm just in Japan. So I'm living in Japan time in 5 a.m. And so I'm happy to be here to join in the conversation.
Wonderful. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. How about Tanli?
Hi, I'm Tanli. I'm in Orange County, California right now, and I'm a sophomore at the University of San Diego.
Wonderful. Welcome. Adriana?
Hey everybody, I'm Adriana Sini. I'm a first-year graduate student. I'm in Atlanta. I go to Clark Atlanta University.
Wonderful, thank you. And that would be great. You and Tanli have done that, but if you could include whether you're a student or perhaps if you work in higher education or something else, that would be great to help to, for me to know who to address with the content. Caitlin.
Hello, I'm a freshman at the University of St. Thomas, and I'm coming in from Dayton, Minnesota by the Twin Cities.
Wonderful, welcome. Santiago.
Hi, everyone. I'm also from the Ashoka team, but based in Mexico. I am the ecosystems coordinator and the project manager for Millones de Agentes de Cambio.
Wonderful, welcome, Santiago. Next up, Valerie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Taylor. I'm from Maryland, and I work for Walden University. We are 100% online.
Wonderful. Glad you could join. Michael Sullivan.
Hi, my name is Michael. I'm a junior at the University of St. Thomas, and I'm calling in from Hibbing, Minnesota, which is about an hour from Canada and Minnesota, so way up north in Minnesota.
Wonderful. Glad you could join us. Brenda.
Hi, I'm Brenda Villegas, and I'm leading the initiative Children and Youth in Mexico. So we are few of Mexico here.
Wonderful, welcome. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Young. I'm a program director for the Kern Family Foundation. We provide support for KEEN, which is a network of universities and colleges of engineering, working to bring an entrepreneurial mindset to students through engineering programs. So I'm here learning all about another network of universities and colleges.
Wonderful. So glad you could join us. And I think last is Violetta.
I work at Tec de Monterrey in Mexico, and I'm the change leader. We are Changemaker Campus, and I'm pleased to be here with you.
Wonderful. So glad to have you. And last, we just had Julie join us. Julie, do you want to say hello? Where are you from?
Sure, sorry.
No problem.
I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I am working in design education and joining you here now.
Wonderful. So glad you could join us. To get us going today, I'm going to start off with a question, and I'm going to ask Kennedy to put us into some breakout groups to kind of set some context before we move into the Changemaker Journey part. So what I'd like you to do, I'm going to put you with one other person, and I'd like you to discuss one major shift in society, and let's say not the COVID-19 shift that we're all going through right now. What's one technological innovation or something else that's happened that really made you stop and say like, wow, this is going to change a lot of things throughout the world? That sound good? I'm going to give you just a couple minutes with one other person. So say hello. And then we're talking about one change in the world that's really made you stop and just take note of how big a shift that was going to, and all the ripples that would cause. All right, Kennedy, whenever you're ready. And it looks like everyone is almost back. Does anyone have anything that came up in that conversation that they want to share as we're starting out our conversation today? And I'll share, for me, I distinctly remember when I studied abroad. I was in Spain, and this was 2005 during my undergraduate. I remember that I had to always go and buy calling cards and like get on a payphone to call home, and it was such a pain. And then I remember the first time I used Skype for an international call, I just couldn't believe that it was free to call over the internet. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is going to change so many people's lives and whole industries. Anyone else want to share? You may be on mute. I feel like I see someone talking.
Yeah, sorry, that's me.
Yeah.
I was kind of sharing a similar thought that you had, Nick, and I was talking about just mobile telephone technology in general, that I remember the first cell phone, this, the big giant brick that came in a bag you put in your phone, and you had to do all of this work in order to get it to function. It was a game changer. You could all of a sudden have a conversation from anywhere.
Yeah, amazing. Anyone else? One more?
The cell phone came up in our session as well, in addition to social media. Social media is just, it has impacted everyone's life.
Absolutely. It's hard to imagine it not being a part of our lives, but so many of us grew up without it. And social media is an interesting one, right? I mean, along with the other two that we mentioned, one thing that we're going to talk about today is how does an accelerating rate of change, like we're seeing in the world today, accelerating rate of change and interconnectivity, what does that mean in terms of opportunities that are being created that we mentioned, but also problems that are cropping up globally and locally is going to be one of the themes of what we're talking about today. So I just wanted to plant that seed. I'm going to start going through a couple of slides, and off and on, we're going to keep breaking out into groups so we can have a good conversation and keep it interactive. But feel free to stop me at any time. And let me start by just talking, I'm going to give the briefest explanation of Ashoka that you've ever received. So Ashoka is a nonprofit organization, a global nonprofit organization that was started 40 years ago by Bill Drayton. And one of the things that we're best known for is having the world's largest network of social entrepreneurs. And in this graphic here, you can see social entrepreneurs around the world addressing issues in all sorts of fields. And one of the defining characteristics of an Ashoka Fellow is, really bringing innovative solutions to pressing issues, but in a way that is systems changing and is really changing the societies and the fields that they're a part of. And I like this quote from Bill Drayton, maybe you've seen it before, but in talking about social entrepreneurship and how Ashoka defines it, Social entrepreneurs are not content to give a fish or to teach how to fish. They will not rest until they have revolutionized the fishing industry. Around 20 years ago, Ashoka started working with young people and started to think about how do we change the way that young people are educated. And part of this was recognizing that there's a certain set of skills and mindsets and tools that these social entrepreneurs around the world are using to change their societies for the better that we need essentially to integrate into the education system, particularly if we are entering this uncharted territory like the slide says. The idea behind this being that the world is more and more being defined by change. We consider the world as being in an accelerating rate of change and interconnectivity, which is, as we talked about, is creating opportunities for people, but is also creating a lot of problems. So in our current state, we really need everyone to be what we call a change maker, people that are able to step up and creatively solve problems and create opportunities for the good of all. And we also need to make sure that we're educating the people that are going, the young people that are going through our education systems. We need to make sure that they're prepared for the world of tomorrow, or the workforce of tomorrow, the world of tomorrow. And in particular, the fact that we can't always plan or define what that world is going to look like. And I think we're all kind of seeing that now, that things can shift very fast in the world today. We want to make sure that along with the kind of traditional education that young people are getting around the world, they're also getting a set of skills that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes that are these changemaker qualities that we've kind of put together from studying the journeys of Ashoka Fellows and of young people who are change makers. This slide is supposed to represent a very oversimplified way to explain that the world is, that change and interconnectivity are increasing at an accelerating rate. And this next slide I like to show, there's a kind of inverse curve to that, which is the demand for repetitive skills in the workforce moving forward. So I'm sure you're seeing that in maybe not quite in your own fields yet or work, but that automation and AI and machine learning are replacing a lot of fields very quickly, and will continue to do so in the future. So we want to make sure that the way that we're educating young people allows them to be highly adaptable and entrepreneurial, and to be able to, whatever change or opportunities that are needed to be created as they move forward, that they're able to do that and to bring other people along on that journey with them, including their communities. I think as we see all over the world today, in the US and beyond, we see communities of people and regions of different countries that have set up education systems and workforce that are much more adaptable to change and are really taking advantage of that, and they're thriving. And we see other parts of our country and other countries that really haven't been able to quite adapt as quickly or as thoroughly to change, and are really struggling. And we call this sometimes a new inequality that's coming up, of people that have these skills to be able to adapt to the changes coming at them, and the people that don't. And a big part of that we recognize is how young people are viewed in terms of their ability to contribute, not just when they graduate from college, but at all ages along their journey, and what they're being taught in and out of school. So in contrast to a little bit to the idea of a social entrepreneur who has a big systems changing, society changing idea, is the idea of a change maker. And this is anyone who takes action to address a problem or create an opportunity, activate others, work towards solutions for the good of all. So this could be a really big change or opportunity that they're trying to bring about, or it could be something really small in their household or with their peer group or in their community. And what Ashoka is working towards is this vision of the world where everyone, including every young person, identifying as a change maker, someone who feels empowered to be able to create change or opportunities. The skills that I talked about from looking at the Ashoka Fellows and many young change makers that we worked with and have worked with over the past 20 years, we've identified these 4 issues that we're trying to integrate into education systems around the world. We really think that the change-making journey begins with empathy, in particular cognitive empathy, which I like to describe as empathy that moves people to take action, or empathy that translates into action. The concept of new leadership, which is not just setting a vision and managing it, but is really leadership that empowers other people to step up and become leaders. Collaborative teamwork, we see more and more in our own work and certainly in the future, but the idea that as hierarchies break down and as our work and our studies turn global, and the problems that we address are going to move beyond silos that are by field or by region, more and more we all need to be able to work effectively on fluid dynamic teams that are coming together to solve problems and then disbanding. And this is happening, going to be happening over and over again for the rest of our lives. So the more that we can educate young people to thrive in that environment and be able to play on those teams and to form in those teams effectively, the better equipped they're going to be to both solve the problems in their communities, but also move ahead in their careers. And the last one is change-making skills. And this is a set of entrepreneurial skills that we talk about all the time that help people move from ideas into action. So not just being able to recognize ideas and to come up with creative solutions, but really being able to prototype and start small and test out ideas and all the good human-centered design and other skills that we learn and we see entrepreneurs use all the time to bring their ideas to life in a successful way. And the main thing that we're going to be talking about today and I want to focus on is this tool that Ashoka's put out a couple of years ago. It's called the Changemaker Journey. And this tool was developed with the young change makers that we work with. And from looking at the paths of our Ashoka Fellows, and it is an incredibly useful framework, I think. I do a lot of teaching of high school age students who are either starting social venture projects or they're trying to move their social venture project to the next level. But I find this very helpful in terms of how I can support them based on kind of where they're at in the journey. I know that all of you, whether you're a student or whether you're working in higher education on Changemaker initiatives, you see such a wide range of where ourselves are at on this journey and where other people are at. So as a first step, it's enormously helpful to be able to kind of contextualize where people are and what might help get them to that next level. So I will run through this and then I'm going to call on someone else to talk a little bit about their journey. But the word that we use for starting the Changemaker journey is spark. And that is, I'm sure you all have experienced it many times over in your life, but it's something that moves you to action, that gets you deeply engaged with a subject or an issue. It usually involves meeting or working with people that can serve as role models, that are change makers, that are not just following a linear path or prescriptive path, but are really able to identify issues as they come up and come up with kind of real-time solutions and go after them. It also generally involves connecting into your own inner passions and talents and connecting them to whatever issue that you're looking at. From there, we encourage students to take those first actions. And, you know, there's often a lot of conversations that happen in between, right? Where you're helping students to identify an issue, but then asking them and kind of challenging them what they'd like to do to try to address that issue, usually in some small way that may or may not be connected to a larger vision at that point. And, you know, many times when you're working with students for the first time on this Changemaker journey, they may not have an idea or an answer the first time when you're asking them how they might address a certain issue that they're seeing in their school or community or online or wherever it is. But with consistency, if you keep asking that student and keep planting those seeds, eventually they're going to come back with an idea. It may not be a very workable idea. None of our ideas were very good the first time we started this journey either. But our role as people that are sparking Changemaker journeys is not to discourage them, but to really encourage them to try out whatever that idea is, and to just ask, that's wonderful, how can I support you to test out that idea? And then help them to have those follow-up conversations where after they try it out, to think about, okay, what are those next actions, right? So there's the first action, then there's this iterative process where they're kind of reflecting on what they did, and generally having conversations usually with someone else around what they could do the next time to pivot or shift or make those small iterative changes and try out something else that might be a little bit more impactful or trying to accomplish whatever it is they want to accomplish. When they do start to get some traction and they're starting to get on track, that appreciation is such a huge part of moving to that next level. And that's something that many of us can do and be the person that is giving that appreciation or acknowledgement to young people as they're moving along their journey, particularly as they're getting over those small actions that, you know, they're realizing that change making may not be the easiest or most glamorous path that they thought it was going to be. So giving some acknowledgement to all the work and some of the failures that maybe they've had along the way, telling their stories, you know, helping them apply for grants. If you are a grant maker, acknowledging some of the work that's been done through kind of early seed funding, and helping them to keep going and seeing what that next level is, which is hopefully organizing some of the work, the early work that they've done, the customer discovery, and turning that into more of an action plan that is going to be scaled up in the future. So moving from appreciation through moving more into the change making with a solid plan, starting to build a team, starting to build funds and generate revenue, but ultimately taking action and continuing to learn. I find in the teaching that I do, the hardest part is often getting students from the idea phase into the action phase. And it's often because they either have, they don't have a big vision and are having trouble kind of figuring out what's the next steps are because they don't, or because they have a very big vision and they have trouble kind of breaking that down into the smaller steps that are going to lead up to it. And after this process, another iterative process, we see this changemaker citizen step, which is appreciating that, you know, change making is not a single project or a single act, but if we can help students along this journey, it becomes a lifelong pattern of behavior. And that's something that we've really seen in the Ashoka Fellows, the, you know, professional adult Ashoka Fellows that we work with, is that the majority of them started their journey at a young age. You know, and the incredible things that they've been able to accomplish in their adult career started through many, many smaller projects that they've undertaken, and they've learned and they've built up this set of skills of empathy and leadership and collaborative teamwork and the entrepreneurial skills that have got them where they are today. I often like to talk about those skills as a muscle, that it's not just something that in a classroom I can teach young people, but they really need to be building those skills for themselves through purpose-driven projects that are really meaningful to them in a way that allows them to exercise and flex those muscles and build them up. So I'm going to pause there and I'm going to introduce, let me stop sharing for a second, a special guest that we have on. So one of the programs that I work on with Ashoka Youth Years is called the Ashoka Young Changemakers Program. And every year around the world, we highlight small cohorts of young changemakers that are under the age of 20 that are doing incredible change-making work, but in particular, change-making work that's helping to spark or support other changemakers around the world and to help more young people start this journey. So with that, I would love to introduce one of our Ashoka Young Changemakers, Victor Yi, who's joining us from Los Angeles. And Victor, I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions and then maybe we can open it up to the other participants as well. But if you could talk a little bit about the project that you have going that is supporting other young changemakers, and maybe start with, you know, the problem that you identified that kind of sparked your own journey. And I would love to hear too, maybe some of those early actions when you were still figuring out what that track was going to be would be great. Over to you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Nick, for the introduction. So currently I'm 17 years old. I started my first venture when I was 15 years old. And the problem that I was addressing was the fact that a lot of students were in school, were really smart, high achieving, but weren't really getting out the exact resources that they were within the high school career. So students were taking high level courses, but what they were doing was just really taking notes and regurgitating information and not being able to apply what, the skills that they've learned into real world applications. So for me, I started a nonprofit organization called Innov Youth, which is the words innovate and youth put together. And essentially we teach young people the research, communication, and the collaborative skills with the goal of promoting societal change. So we hold workshops, we hold conferences, and also we mentor young students to actually start social impact projects of their passion and interests. I would just want to say that like the problem that first started was actually like an actual physical problem. So I'm sure that many of you guys kind of experienced something of the sort as well. But I was 15 in a history class, and I was, raising my hand to talk about a big social issue that was going to connect to a past relevant issue, particularly more specifically the French Revolution. And I was talking a little bit more about Venezuela and learning about the corruption and oppression and how we can use the skills from past history to actually apply it and actually create real solutions for existing societies. And my teacher shut me down really quickly and told me that it's not going to be tested. So therefore, let's not talk about it. And I think that's the first time that I really learned that our education system really doesn't perpetuate learning on a different level. I think it really does, help us understand what's happened in the past, but does not help us perpetuate that changemaker idea, which is being able to understand society frameworks and also being able to understand the problems in which they occur in the community. So that's when I wanted to kind of get something started, get some students thinking of not just, understanding what current events are and just, what happened in the past, but actually connect them together so they can solve real issues in their communities, from environmental sustainability to mental wellness, to other sorts of, different realms that students are passionate about. So that's when I started my nonprofit organization, and it's definitely been a ride for the past 2 years. I've had a lot of setbacks as a change maker, from having my first workshop, having 3 or 4 students join, and a lot of older people, especially my teachers and staff, that were saying that I was not supposed to be doing the work that I was supposed to be doing because of the fact that I should just focus on learning. But I think that after this change-making journey and being able to impact a lot of students on different levels and reaching different students, I feel like there is an importance that we should learn about not only civic duty and civic engagement, but also about just being passionate about the work that you're doing. So students should be volunteering for a cause, that students should be starting small projects in which they're passionate about that can actually change the society for the better.
Sorry, let me unmute. Thank you, Victor. Appreciate that. I want to draw out a little bit more about the beginning of your journey. One of the things that I try to do in the classes that I teach is to try to address some of the emotional difficulty of starting that changemaker journey and to try to really normalize those feelings for students and help them to understand that that's a normal part of the process. I think a lot of times, particularly when we spotlight, whether it's successful adult entrepreneurs or it's young changemakers, we see people like you, Victor, that are able to just very confidently get on a call like this, talk about all the success you've had. And I think a lot of people, when they're looking at the accessibility of the changemaker journey, are like, wow, I wish I could do that. But, I'm here struggling in these first actions and I'm feeling anxious, as I'm sure you did as well during those initial webinars, right? When you only had 3 or 4 people. But any thoughts on that and maybe how you help young people to overcome that as they're starting their journey?
Definitely. I think the first sort of advice that I would love to give is the fact that I am in no means, someone that's elevated to another status than all the rest of you guys. Just like you guys, I'm a human being and I actually started from ground zero. So, understanding the fact that anyone can make the change happen is really important. I think that, typically when we see a lot of what's happening on the news, we usually try to pertain changemakers to people that were celebrities, people that have resources. But I think it's really important to note that everyone has their shared experiences and can contribute greatly to the community that they belong in. And for me, that starts mainly within the high school community. So when I first started my kind of small venture type thing, it wasn't actually an existing nonprofit yet. It was just merely an idea that, I had told my teacher about to kind of increase social responsibility among students so that they're a little bit more understanding of the issues that happen around them. And then it was, you know, a lot of iterations. I had actually gone to my local library to ask if I can hold a quick little session and little workshop type thing on, you know, discussing a little bit more about social events. And I was shut down, not just one time, but about 5 or 6 times I was rejected because the librarian and the manager had said, you know, we don't accept young people to hold workshops. You guys don't have the experience. And I think, you know, that's powerful to say that, you know, when someone really does not give you the opportunity, that should drive you even more to do so. Because I think, you know, especially in this generation, young people really do have the power and they do have the voice to really make that change, because all these problems are existent from previous generations as well. So, you know, because we are living it firsthand, we're able to understand, you know, not only the physical parts of it, but also about how it's going to impact our own futures as well. So I think, you know, talking about the first steps, it definitely took a lot of iterations of thinking about, you know, how to actually establish something like this, and also just reaching out. I think that's really important too. I reached out to my first local community center in my city, and I was also rejected twice before, you know, going on a third time when I begged actually the manager to really give me one chance to really hold that workshop. And then it took me 2 or 3 or 4 months to actually get some sort of curriculum together, to get some of my friends involved. But at the end, you know, when we had our first workshop, after physically in person, we had about 100 attendees. And I think that's really important to note that, you know, you have the ability to really make that change if you are willing to sacrifice, you know, the failures and all of the experiences that are out within. Those failures are not necessarily failures that you call themselves, but they're necessary steps for you to understand your idea, to understand how you can change a little bit of an aspect of what you're thinking about, and also prove to them that, you know, you are creating a worthwhile idea. I think because of change making is definitely changing the system itself. So of course you're going to have a lot of setbacks. Of course you're going to have people that are going to reject the idea, but it's necessary for someone to understand afterwards how important it is for someone like you to actually make that change.
Yeah, well said, Victor. Thank you. One of the things that I want to talk about in this session is, you know, thinking about the Changemaker journey as one that we are all on and that can kind of help us, but also using it as a framework to identify how we can support other people's Changemaker journey. And, you know, we talked about there's the spark part of the journey, those first actions, and then the appreciation, right? So on the first actions, 2 questions for you. On the first set of actions that you were doing where you were getting rejected a lot and you were getting told no by a lot of adults, my first question is, who was there to kind of support you during that time? And my second question is the appreciation. So once you did get a little bit of traction, you said, and you had, you know, that workshop where 100 people showed up, right? Where you were starting to see those little bit of success. Was there someone or something that gave you some kind of acknowledgement of the success that helped you to push you along to the next level?
Definitely. I think, you know, the first part that is really important is to have someone that believes in your idea. And it doesn't have to be 5 or 10 or 100 people, but just that one person that can really push you through and empower you to actually get the idea done. And that for me was one of my school teachers that, you know, was a little bit more contemporary and really had the opportunity to push students to go beyond their comfort zones. And so for me, I definitely had a lot of guidance in the beginning of trying to understand how to talk to staff and how to talk to faculty about holding workshops, or telling them that I had the information necessary to change a part of our curriculum. And so for me, you know, the first action that I actually took was, you know, actually at home, where I started to brainstorm different ideas. We went through a lot of curriculum changes. So kind of, you know, I host a lot of workshops on social innovation. We do a lot of connection to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because I think it's super important not to just understand what's happening in our community, but also connect it to real world issues so students actually understand that this is a big point. That, you know, their change is not only the change within another person, but they're actually changing the world slowly and slowly. And so the first thing that I did was try to understand, what am I actually going to address? And it was mainly social responsibility. So I went to a lot of, you know, the managers and a lot of the different people that were in charge of these various centers. And, you know, the first thing that I would always get is, why are you doing this? Or, you know, you can just go volunteer nearby, you know, to create a club on campus, Victor, you know, like, you know, why are you here? We we don't have spots available for you because we have adults taking on those challenges. And I think that it's particularly very influential and helpful to show them what it takes to actually get everything done. Because in theory, being a change maker is not just creating the change, but also empowering others to create the change as well. So I think, once I held my first workshop, people started to realize, I think, the difference that it makes when a young person addresses a young audience versus an older person addressing a young audience. I think there's a lot of change and a lot of empowerment and inspiration to take when you see a young person standing on that stage, being given a platform to actually speak about the issues that are actually important. And so, I think one of the biggest, funniest places that, I have been able to kind of address is my own parents as well. In the beginning, my own parents were kind of confused about what I was doing because I was contacting people. I was having, calls just like this online. And, they were thinking like, a high school student, like, you're supposed to be focusing on your work. Like, why are you, so on your computer so many times? But I think, after a while, when they realized the impact that I was making, so that students that I was talking to started to, create their own projects and started recycling campaigns in their cities, or started a confidence campaign in their own school to actually get students to prevent bullying in their schools. I think it's really important to see that, there's a lot of power within yourself when you tell your own story, and when you also work side by side with the actors and the stakeholders. For example, the people like you, Nick, who are, working in such an amazing organization, to people that are educators, to people that are, politicians and elected officials that can actually supply you with the necessary resources to actually move forward with your venture project.
Great, thank you so much for that, Victor. I'd love to open it up now for a conversation around change making broadly and the Changemaker journey. And if anyone has a question for Victor, would love to kind of help to facilitate that as well. Any comments from anyone or questions that have come up on how this relates to their own work or studies?
Here's my personal question about Victor. So do you have any mentor or some kind of person who can give some comments and feedback, or do you have any particular learning community with the recipient and so or young student who wants to take a step more a formal change maker? So could you tell me about Ma?
Yeah, of course. I think the first mentor that was super important to me was my teachers in an aspect. I think, when teachers start to go beyond, let's learn this in the classroom, it really provides students with the stability and also the, the confidence to really go forward with what they want to do. So I think really it really starts with the teachers and the people that are educating the students, because not only the professors or the counselors, they've been through the entire system, and people like educators are interacting with students every day on a personal level. So I think when teachers push students and identify students that are actually not only smart, but also can actually make a change and are really thoughtful in the process, I think just pushing them a little and saying, you are really doing well. Why don't you kind of think about something that you can actually, apply the skills that you learned and actually try to change your community for the better. I think that one small question really provides students with the thought process so that when they go home, they start thinking, and then they establish a really personal relationship with the teachers and the people that are involved. So I think, really it starts with the people that are important to you, like your community members. It can also be your parents as well. I think many people kind of, feel that, they cannot connect to, people like that. But I think it's super important to have these conversations, because then it sparks that little thing. And that's when Ashoka really talks about that small spark, because that one spark can allow one conversation to happen and then a whole conversation to happen. And then that leads to more physical work. And then in the end, students have a mindset shift. So I think when people have that mindset shift, no longer are they just in the classroom trying to get a good grade or trying to learn the materials, but now they're putting the materials and giving it to those who need it the most. And now that's actually Changemaker work that they're doing more so than just, being in the classroom and just learning.
Yeah, thank you. One thing that I've seen through my own work with the, with this Changemaker Journey framework is that oftentimes the important people that are helping a young person on this changemaker journey, or mentors, are often different during those different phases, right? The person who is sparking that journey might be different than the person that's helping you take those first actions and really through a lot of trial and error figure out what's going to work. And that's probably different than that person that's going to bring appreciation and funding. And then when you reach a little bit further along in the journey, there is hopefully a different set of mentors and a learning community that can step up. I know that we have regular meetings with Victor and a whole a set of young change makers around the country that are quite far advanced in their own change making journey and are really focusing more on how do they empower others on a large scale. But certainly that's a different conversations and a different set of mentorship that's happening than 2 years ago at the beginning of that journey. So anyone else, questions for Victor or anyone else here? Or just comments? I'd love for people to share their own experience with this.
Hey, Victor, Adriana here. I just want to highlight something that I said in the chat. One of the things that I really liked what you said was starting with people that are close to you in order to help you get to where you want to go. Because, like, for example, at school, in my master class for social entrepreneurship, we're so focused on trying to get to the bigger people that it stresses us out, for one, and for two, it gets us nowhere. And I think it's important for us to start, where you said, for us to really take advantage of the people that are close to us in our community.
Yeah, I really echo that. Thank you so much, Adriana. I think when it talks about, the first part of the change-making process, it's about kind of using and taking advantage of the people that can give you the resources in the beginning. I think, like, just like you in the beginning, I was wondering, like, how can I get this project to be so massive scale that, now, it's in multiple countries and stuff like that. But I think, when we start, we have to kind of realize that we need to establish that credibility first. We need to be able to understand and have people, testify to say that, like, this is an actual idea that can exist. So that's when we need that one close person. That can be your friend, that can be your educator, that can be anyone around you physically that really supports you and says yes whenever you do something. And that's all you really need, honestly, because when you have that drive and you talk to that person and they're like, yes, Adriana, yes, keep on going forward, I think that really propels you to see that, like, let's take this work a little bit further. And I think, when we realize that, like, the massiveness of the project, it will come faster than you realize as well. So sometimes, when I was thinking in the beginning, like, this is just everything, I'm just affecting my high school, like, how's this going to work out for every other student in America? I think, we can kind of, figure out that idea as we come along. And that will start to impact more people when they realize that, what you're doing is impactful. So they're going to join on your journey as well. So basically what you are creating is a whole, journey of young change makers that are actually following along your lead to say, what am I going to do next to actually change my own community? And when that happens, then you'll have, like, kind of like a ripple effect, kind of like that chart where it's like, an exponential function of just like, a lot of it is really starting in the basics, but as you kind of move forward, like a year or two from now, then, it's going to be massive. So really, I think there's so much power in just, the people close to you to just say, to support you and to accept what you're doing and to just push you forward, because you only really need that one person to say yes.
Thank you. Well said.
Thank you, Adriana. And that's a great transition to a little exercise I want to do before we stop at 4:45 Eastern time today. I think that point of really starting small and starting local and starting individual is so powerful when we think about, our own change-making journey, and in particular, helping to spark or support the change-making journey of others. I know a lot of times, for educators at least, there's the component of it of learning the theory of entrepreneurship, right? And of working with young people and of teaching this. But I found that in my own work, it's so helpful to be reaching out on the individual level. And I feel like it's helped me to become such a better coach and mentor and supporter. A lot of times you all see, and I'm sure, Victor, you've seen this too, that it's a very different conversation you're having with students that are very motivated and are opting in to change making, right? And they're already sparked, right? And they're like ready to go, and you just have to say yes and to go. And there's a different set of conversations and skills that I have been in my own journey trying to cultivate to help to kind of spark those students that don't already identify as a change maker and maybe have never been asked the question before, like, oh, you recognize this problem, what do you want to do about it, and how can I support you in that? So in that frame of mind, I'm going to ask you all to quickly just think about either a peer or a young person in your life, someone, and not a theoretical one, like a specific person with a name. And it could be, you know, a child of yours, niece, nephew, friend, student, someone that is really meaningful to you personally. For me, I've been trying to work recently with my my nephew, Drake, who's 10 years old and lives in San Francisco. So we've been exchanging emails about the COVID-19 epidemic, which has been really interesting for me. But everybody have somebody in mind, though, that they can think of? Okay, great. Now, the next step is I want you to think about, for that individual person, what is, who are they? Like, what is unique about them? What do they like to do? What upsets them? What issues do they care about personally? How do they spend a lot of their time? Basically, what are some of the things that makes that person who they are? And for our last little exercise, I'm going to ask Kennedy to put us back into groups. And what I'd like you to discuss with the person that you get paired up with is the person that you identified that is a young person that's meaningful to you, whether it's someone your age or younger than you. Where do you think they are on the Changemaker journey? Are they someone that needs that initial spark, or are they currently taking action that maybe needs some support, or they need that appreciation for hitting a threshold where they're actually finding traction, or maybe they're farther along? But what do you think that you could do to support them wherever they are? And I'm just going to give us a couple minutes to talk about that with a partner, and then we'll come back and maybe share some of the things that came out. All right, everybody, welcome back. Just a quick debrief as we wrap up. Any thoughts or reflections that came out of that conversation around what we might do to spark or support young change makers around us in a very kind of tangible, real way?
I guess I'll start it off. So I talked about my twin sister, who's a fine artist, and she's really passionate about bringing an appreciation for fine art to the masses and really portraying Black people in a positive light through fine art. And one of the ways that I could support her now, just for the first step, is like what Victor said, is just being more supportive of her and pushing her and telling her yes, because she already has the drive and she already has the conviction. She just needs somebody to continue to be in her corner. And then I was telling Tanley, who was my partner, I'll do that from now. And then as she continue to go through the stages, I'll figure out more ways to support her.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Anything come up that they want to share?
This is my story about Japanese youth venture program. So I've been working in Ashoka, Japan, particularly looking for the program to the youth venture can take a step up toward senior level youth venture or top level youth venture. In other words, so the program can bring them to the high level of Changemaker Journey. And so regularly I listen to the story behind their Changemaker Journey. As you know, so 2011, so a huge earthquake hit on the east coast of Japan, and a lot of Japanese young students and college students rushed to those areas to help them, and so some of them turned into a youth venture program recipient, and so
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. I think helping students to connect to their own story is such a powerful way to help to spark that journey. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess
yeah,
I can do
Victor.
something quick. Yeah, I just first want to appreciate everyone for joining this call, because I know in this time, like, definitely change making is necessary, and it's great that we have a lot more time on our hands to really brainstorm a bit. And just want to take the time to just thank all of you guys for joining such an amazing call, where we're not only learning about how to affect change, but about just meeting people that are like-minded and have the drive to make that change happen. So just want to thank every one of you guys for joining the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Victor. And that was a point I wanted to make too, is that the current health crisis around the world that everyone's going through is so challenging, but also an amazing learning opportunity for people to start making change right where they are in their homes and peer groups and online communities and geographic communities. We're seeing certainly the results of more change and interconnectivity in society, and all the challenges that presents. But that has been one thing that we've been trying to do as we're sparking journeys, is to really get young people to think about what are some of the very immediate challenges that need to be addressed today, even in your home, for example, and trying to really kickstart journeys that will grow in depth and impact from there, but really trying to help them to see how they can start in a very small way to start building these skills. I think we're running out of time. Would love to continue this conversation. If anyone wants to connect, please feel free to contact me. I'll put my email address in the chat here, or you can find me on LinkedIn. But thank you so much for joining us today. I hope it was useful. If you'd like a copy of the Changemaker Journey graphic PDF to use for your own teaching, or just for whatever you're doing or your own studies, please feel free to drop me a line. And thank you, Kennedy, for being our host today. Appreciate your support.